1999, I took my residence in Columbus, Ohio. I started to manufacture men's clothing and sell it to public directly. My business flourished right from the start. Pretty soon I had a dozen of salesmen on the road, and I began to make money. By the year 1913, my concern was standing pretty solidly on its feet. Then came the disastrous flood, when I, with many other men, found myself practically wiped out. After the setback, I resolved to settle in Cincinnati. I was pretty close to the wall those days. So close indeed that I have to obtain permission from my merchandise creditors to move my stock and to find security for a more of $700. I owed my bank. However, I got started with a steady progress in 3 years. And in June 1916, the A. Nash Company was organized with a capital of $60,000. We had an office, cutting rooms, and a stock of goods. We cut the garments and farmed them out to be made up. Meanwhile, the World War continued to its frightful work of devastation and, as many reasoning human being could see, this country was surely, if slowly, drifting into it. We made no efforts to develop, plant, electing until the great struggle should be ended. At this time, the A. Nash Company was one of the smallest concerns in Cincinnati. As I just intimated, we had no factory of our own. We had a place of business in the Power Building and a furnished floor space to a man who just joined us and who made garments under contract. Short while after the armistice was concluded, this man came up to me and said, "Mr. Nash, I have heard nothing of my mother and sisters since the outbreak of the war. I want to go back to Europe. Will you buy my shop?" "Yes," I replied. "Under those conditions, I will be glad to." So we bought this man and took over his business and the people he employed. For the first time, his payroll was in my hands. Concerning this payroll, I want certain facts borne in my mind. During the time America was engaged in the World War, business conditions in the clothing line in the city of Cincinnati were decidedly poor. A very few large government contractors were obtained by any of the firms located there, and no civilian clothes in any quantity were being bought. Simply because all of our young fellows were expecting almost daily to be called upon to don the uniform of Uncle Sam. So the workers were on old low-wage scale when I took over this business. Another fact should borne in my mind, namely the shop we bought was literally sweatshop. And that sweatshops are always made up of inefficient workers who cannot get jobs in high-grade shops. Wages in what are known as inside shops, run by the factories themselves, always starts where the sweatshop wages leave off. Thus the wages being paid in the shop at the time when I took over must not be confused with the wages paid in the inside shops of the large clothing manufacturers of Cincinnati. There were two workers in the shop who took my attention. One was a tall, dignified old lady, close to 80 years of age, who pulled out bastings and sewed buttons. The other one was a little hunchback who ran a machine. They worked on a payroll at $4 a week. Workers possessing little more ability than they were supposed to possess were receiving $5 and $6. The highest paid woman in the shop was drawing $7. The oppressors and skilled man were getting $18 a week. Such was the wage scale handed to me when the A. Nash Company became the owners of their own factory. I looked at the payroll and saw instantly something stood between it and myself. This was the golden rule that recently I had been doing a good deal of talking about. I called my eldest son into the conference and said to him, "Look at the payroll." Now it must be remembered that the boy was just back from the soul-wrecking experience in the battlefields of Europe, that as a result he was in wretched health and had not yet begun to look to these matters as I had myself. "Well, what of it?" he asked me as he scanned the paper. "Just this," I answered. "You have been with me in some of the meetings I talked recently. On behalf of Liberty Loans, you know something of the firm conviction that has sprung up in my heart concerning what this world can become if we really live out the golden rule. Do you think holding such a conviction that I can go into that shop next Saturday and hand these people pay envelopes with any such wages in them as that sheet indicates? What else can you do?" my son retorted. "If you don't, you knock yourself clean out. Yours is the same scale of wage that is being paid in all similar shops. And if you want to keep your end up, there is nothing you can do but stick to it." Nor was there. At least it looked that way just then. I went home and discussed the situation with my wife. My boy's argument, taken at its face value, was sound enough. We were closing a fiscal year which was showing the loss of $4,000. Our original investment of $60,000 was shown by a recently taken inventory to have depreciated to $56,000. No, there appeared to be but one alternative. I had to carry on this clothing business and continue to mete out that I knew to be rank injustice, or to get out of it. I decided to do the latter, and as there were only a few stockholders besides myself, in common, I called them together the next morning and put the proposition up to them. They agreed to liquidate the company after I had promised to make good their loss and return their investment. The most I hoped to do was to be able to manage to get out with enough money to make a small first payment on a farm. As I said that time, there's the only place where a man can be a real Christian. He certainly can't be the one in the clothing business. After the meeting with my fellow stockholders, I went into the factory and called little group of my workers together and said something of this kind to them. Friends, you have heard no doubt that we have bought this shop, and I have come in to get acquainted with you. No doubt, too, you have heard a great deal of the talks that I have been giving during the war of the Brotherhood and the Golden Rule, while pleading the cause of Christianity and its affiliation, my conception of true democracy. Now, I am going to do a bit of talking to you. First, I want you to know that the Brotherhood is a reality with me. You all are my brothers and sisters, children of the same great Father that I am, and entitled to all justice and fair treatment that I want to myself. And so as we run this shop, which to me meant for 3 or 4 months longer, as God being my helper, I am going to treat you all as my brothers and sisters, and the Golden Rule is going to be our only governing law, which means that whenever I would like to have you do to me, where I am in your place, I am going to do to you. Now, I want on not knowing any of you personally. I want you to raise your hand as I call your names. I need the first name. Under it was written, Swing Button, $4 per week. I looked straight before me to the little group, but saw no hand. Then I looked to my right, saw the old lady that I referred to, holding up her trembling hand. At first I could not speak, because instantly the face of my mother came between the old lady and myself. I thought of my mother, of being in such circumstances, and what of such situations I would want someone to do for her. I hardly knew what to say, because I was aware that when I went into the shop, after agreeing to stand all of the loss entitled by the liquidation of the company, I could not go too far in raising the wages. It seemed to be my obvious duty to salvage something to the boys who were coming home from the military service, and to the daughter who is entering the university. But as I saw the old lady, I saw my mother. I finally blurted out, I don't know what it worth to sew buttons. I never sewed a button on. But your wages to begin with will be $12 a week. That was a 300% raise. The next name in the list was of that little hunchback. His wages were the same as those of the aged lady. But I had established a precedent, so I had to give her a 300% increase also. So I went through the entire wage sheet, up to the $18 a week pressers, whose salary I increased to $27. Let it be borne in mind that I was not acting under the spell of some wondrous, compelling vision. I realized perfect clearness that the granting of these increases meant that every Saturday night I would be taking just so many dollars as the increased payrolls demanded of the value of the farm I was proposing to buy. But I reached a point in my thinking when I felt that unless I was prepared to sacrifice every bit of laudable idealism I had in my soul, the thing had got to be gone through with. Having so far settled matters with my conscience and sense of equity, I began to look around for my farm. Beyond of exercising some sort of general oversight, I ceased to pay much attention to the clothing business. Yet I became aware that unmistakably the sales were picking up, because our soldier boys were being demobilized and the demand for civilian clothing accompanied the process. Just at this time I received the news that one of my very dear friend was in serious financial difficulties. He was the man on whom I set the highest value. He had a noble wife and 2 lovely daughters, about the age of my girl, and he was facing bankruptcy. So the Golden Rule began to get in its work again. What can be done to help my friend? I asked to my own self, to aid me in answering my own question. I went to my bookkeeper to find out how much ready money I could command. What the bookkeeper told me held me to absolute astonishment. I was simply astounded to find out that how much money we had on hand. "What's going on here?" I asked. "Are you selling goods by yard?" "No," she answered. "But don't you know we are doing almost 3 times of amount of business that we were doing this last year?" "No, I do not. Never dreamt such a thing." "How it is being done? From where are you getting garments made?" "I think they are making in the shop," my bookkeeper answered. "I have had no bills sent for the outside work. The shop was running at full capacity when we bought it." I said, "Have you bought a lot of extra machines?" No, she had seen no bills for machines either. "But we are doing business just the same," she returned. "The money is coming here and we are depositing it in the bank." After the help had gone, I went down to the factory and talked to the forelady. "What's going on here?" I asked. "Why, nothing," she answered, "except that we are making a lot of clothes. The bookkeeper told me that you are making 3 times as many clothes when we took over the shop. Is that a fact?" "It is. I don't know the figures," she went on, "but I know that we are producing merchandise on less cost than before you increase the wages of the help. Take, for instance, the old lady whose weekly salary you increased for 300%. You should come in sometime and take a peep at her. Somehow her poor old crippled fingers have got limbered up. A look of youth has come into her eyes, and she is doing the amount of twice of work she ever did before. But the biggest thing in this shop," she continued, "the case is of skilled help, who were one time simply loafing on the job. They have got busy lately and showing us all how to get work done. The garments are coining through in one instant stream." I felt completely at sea. "Do you mind me telling just what has brought all this about?" I asked the forelady. "I hardly think that I can," she replied. "Why?" "Well, for one thing, the story would have to include some talk possibly you wouldn't care to hear." "Don't mind me. Please go on and tell me. I have heard rather peculiar talk at one time and another. Just relate what happened." "Well, it was something like this. After you left the shop on the day when you announced your intention of raising wages, we all stood around for a few moments, looking rather helplessly at each other. Presently, the little Italian presser, you know him, blurted out, 'Well, I'll be damned.' We all looked at him. After a minute's silence, he went on, 'Whatever this golden rule thing is, I don't know, but what Mr. Nash told us was that what all he wanted us to do was to work just as we would want him to work if we were up in the office paying wages and he was back here doing the work. Now, I know, if I was the boss and would come in and talk to the workers and raise their wages, I would want them to work like hell." "There," said the forelady. "That's about all there is to it. Our people just caught the drift of Tony's idea and went in the spirit of it. That's why we have trebled our output. If I talked for a week, I couldn't tell you any more. Nor can I." That is how it all began. In a very short time, we found ourselves unable to handle the volume of the business, which began to pour in. I soon lost the interest in purchasing of that farm and began to have a vision of the possibility of becoming a genuinely Christian man in the world of commerce and industries. I desire to be implicitly believed when I state that was not for this vision, this possibility. I could never have brought myself to remain in this business world. But the foregleams of the coming day have shone upon me, and I determined to utilize every means compatible with the adoption and operation of the Golden Rule to demonstrate the fact that in the 20th century of the Christian era, the principles laid down by the Jesus of Nazareth in the first could be made to work successfully, not merely as a sacrificial ideal for the mutual well-being of the mankind